Welcome to the Halifax Real Estate Podcast. I'm Jason Paul, a realtor in Halifax, Nova Scotia at eXp Realty, and I'm here to help you gain a better understanding of real estate in Halifax. Mark Kennedy is the owner and operator of Eastbrook Property Management, and is here today to discuss the impact of the new rent control regulations introduced by Nova Scotia's Premier Tim Houston. Please welcome Mark Kennedy. Hey Mark, how are you?
Hey Jason, doing good. How are you today?
I'm good. Round two.
Yes, I'm ready to go. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you again. I know for the audience here, we tried to do this once already, and my puppy Thor was very happy to bite Mark, and Mark was very gracious to come back after being, not bitten hard, but nibbled, we'll say.
Good thing I'm a dog lover.
Yeah, puppies, right? So, Mark, what is it you do for the living for the audience?
So Mark Kennedy, I own Eastbrook Property Management, based out of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. We recently launched the business actually just this year.
Yep.
Getting ready to push a little more marketing, so it's quite possible your listeners haven't even heard of me yet, but they certainly will very soon. So I manage a property management company serving HRM and surrounding areas. My main client base is focused on real estate investors. And certainly since I launched that website, I get a lot of phone calls from people right across the country.
Yeah.
So I'm really supporting that investor market and providing a full property management solution. And it's certainly important to recognize the tenant factor in my business as well. I've been a landlord since 2008. Managing my own rental properties as well. So a lot of years under my belt in this business, and I thought it was time to start helping others because I've certainly learned a lot over the years, and really excited to start growing the portfolio and helping people in the community.
Love it. Why property management? Because like a lot of people will tell you managing tenants is fun.
It is, and I must say, yeah, I learned a lot over the years. You learn from your mistakes, but I've always been very business focused. My background is in project management in the IT sector. Throughout my career, I've been helping businesses really improve how they run and do things on a day-to-day basis. And it was always my dream to start my own business and apply that for my own purpose. And I really saw a big opportunity with property management, HRM in Nova Scotia in general. It's really a booming market right now, as you know, as a realtor.
Yeah, it's fun.
There's high demand on the rental industry now as well. Certainly very low vacancy rates. And with my experience, I saw an opportunity to really leverage some of my business experience to really bring a new experience to the industry. Again, just a really big opportunity that I've seen, and really wanted to jump on that and get moving on that right away.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
How okay, so I know we're supposed to talk about tenants, but something came yesterday that we both really want to dive into. So yesterday is October 21st, or maybe it was Wednesday, I think.
It was Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Our provincial elected official, Tim Houston, announced the duration, increase the rent cap until the end of 2023, and you're in that industry managing everyone's properties. So what is Tim Houston and the Conservative Party of Nova Scotia announced for the rent cap from now until 2023?
Yeah, and just for some background and context on that, I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, we've had a rent cap in place now since COVID. 2% cap on rental raises per year right now. Prior to that, there was no cap. So that certainly put a lot of limitations on landlords and investors raising rents, and property managers as well, like myself. So that has now been extended to December 31st, 2023, another 2 years. The initial plan was to remove that by February of 2022, or once the state of emergency was released. To say the least, my head's been spinning the last 2 days since this announcement. I've got a lot of counterparts and grown a large network in the investor community. And there's certainly a lot of heavy discussion going on as this is kind of changes the initial communication from the political platform that was announced during the election. So
Yeah.
I think this comes as a bit of a surprise for many.
I mean, Tim Houston outright said rent control doesn't work. And in August or September, I think, when he first got it out.
That's right, yeah. But just to justify that, it's important to understand this is a very complex issue.
Of course.
And the government is now, part of this is just to provide some time to prepare a plan for the housing affordability issue and shortage.
Well, I think what they did is they've realized that, I mean, Tim Houston's always said it's a supply problem. It's always been a supply problem.
That's right.
So I think he's done it to buy himself time to get the supply, or at least start the groundwork on the supply before he drops the rental cap. Right?
That's correct. So the other big part of that announcement is $3 million in funding to develop 1,100 units.
Yeah.
That's likely just going to scratch the surface, but it's a start. It is showing that they recognize that supply is an issue. They are also providing some incentives for the industry in terms of trades, in terms of tax breaks.
Yeah, $50,000 income, waiving of personal tax.
That's correct.
Income tax.
Because there's absolutely a huge demand on the trade sector right now, and it's very difficult to find contractors and builders for any project right now. So they're also recognizing that shortage.
Yeah.
So of course we want to develop, but if you don't have the people,
how can you develop?
How can you develop? So they're recognizing that as well.
The thing I found, the biggest caveat I found was the part about rent evictions. How it's you can't evict now to renovate, and if you do evict to renovate and you want to evict to renovate, you have to compensate the tenant with potentially 1 to 3 months worth of rent before they can vacate the premises.
That's correct. Yeah. Again, a very hot topic as well within the community. Many investors certainly look at optimizing their properties to add value, and that certainly can't be done in many cases if it's occupied.
No.
So with the challenge of the current vacancy rate, low vacancy rate, and generally any investment property that's purchased in today's market is already occupied.
Yeah.
So that it immediately eliminates the opportunity to do any immediate retrofits on the property. Certainly interior retrofits.
And you're paying a premium for the rental, right, for the property right now, because we are in the housing market that we're in.
That's correct.
Right. So people are paying premium, top dollar, where where the tenants might be on old leases, and it might be also run down. A rundown unit is not uncommon in this city.
That's right. Yeah. Very true.
So when if you have a new investor taking this on, and let's be frank here, if you're a real estate investor, it's cash flow. That's the only reason you do it. You're not trying to, if you're losing money, it's not a good business model. So they're looking for cash flow. You're paying the premium, the rents are too low, and the unit's in disarray. If the market rent is at, let's say $1,800 to be conservative for what we've seen in terms of the Halifax Peninsula is getting, but $1,800 conservative, and your market and your rents are collecting $1,000 each, I'm losing out on $1,600.
That's correct.
For a business, right? Mm-hmm. So to not be able to increase rent, or only 2%, and you've paid the premium to get in the door, and you can't do any renovations to even get up to $1,800. I mean, I can understand why the investor community would be having deep-hearted discussions about the current market in Halifax and in Nova Scotia in general, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very heated discussions, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I must say, I enjoy a challenge. And when I started this business, I knew I would have some challenges going into this. And a little pressure. I find I perform better when under pressure. And I am really trying to gain the perspective of all stakeholders involved.
Of course.
My customers are not just the investors, they are also the tenants.
Of course.
So I really try to facilitate discussions and develop a model that could potentially provide some solutions to help with that, with the current restrictions we're currently in. Just back to your point around cash flow, another contributing factor to that right now is certainly the economy. Inflation rates, or consumer price index, is at the highest level in 20 years. So when you look at that on a cash flow perspective, our operational costs are going up.
Yes.
To maintain a property.
Yeah.
So we're now capped at 2% in terms of our rental increases, but we're now seeing inflation rates of over 4%. So if you look at that on a scale, income is going down.
Yes.
From an investor's perspective. So with a hot market right now in terms of sales, a lot of investors have released a lot of their properties.
Yep.
Which is removing supply from the stock.
Yep.
And now with this announcement, I would suspect we may see more sales. And with a lot of those sales, then their transition, certainly the single-family home market, are transitioned to owner-occupied.
Yeah.
So removing that from the rental supply as well. So again, a complex issue, but many moving parts there to factor in.
There are so many caveats to this issue in a sense of the reason the rent cap is in place is to protect the average tenant, right? Because the average tenant can't afford on minimum wage the rental market that is currently being achieved in Halifax. And we understand that, of course. You don't want, we had the homeless population is only growing up. Yeah. As we get more and more increases on putting more pressure on rents, putting more pressure on wages. And then on the other side of that, though, you do have investors who typically, I believe someone told me the other day who was in the land development sector that 95% of all developments in the province of Nova Scotia are private. 95% of all developments in Nova Scotia is through the private sector. It's the other 5% is government and nonprofit. The private sector, as we both know, he only cares about profit because they run it as a business. And if you de-incentivize them to run profit for business, I'm not sure where you're going to get the supply from. Because they're, like you said, they're going to offload properties and put them in other cash flowing sectors. I can see an increase of Airbnbs suddenly being a very real thing.
Very good point. Yeah, that's because certainly Airbnbs aren't under the same restrictions.
No,
it's a completely different ballgame.
They did mention, there's a little caveat paragraph of Airbnbs in there that they will be putting restrictions in place. What that looks like, no one has any idea because they haven't released any plans. But even right now, to make it simple, if you can get in before the restrictions come in, you can probably get grandfathered in because that's how this city works in terms of old code. You just get grandfathered in because you were established before a certain date or time. So I could see that playing out that way. But it's complex. What are the discussions you've been having with your clients about that change in the rental cap? How have they been going?
Well, it's only been 2 days, but there have been a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom meetings, and I also have a lot of investors that are really in the queue looking to purchase here in Nova Scotia. I get calls from right across the country, a lot of which are in BC, in Ontario, and they're not on the ground. A lot of them never even visited Nova Scotia before, so they are not as familiar with our current restrictions in the political environment and so on. So it's really, as a property manager, it's my job to inform them. Yeah. And help guide them through their decisions and their investments. And I really take a lot of stake in that and really stand by trying to help them grow their portfolios.
Of course.
And
that is the service you provide.
Absolutely. And now it's important to note that we're not the first province to be in this situation. No. Both Ontario and BC, well over a decade ago, found themselves in a similar situation and actually do have current rent control measures in place. Yep. Much more mature and developed from where we are now, so at least we have some others to compare to. Yeah. And that's really where I'm trying to develop my knowledge as well and try to provide some good information. And I do intend to speak and meet with various stakeholders in the community. Not just the investors, but I would like to speak with some of the not-for-profits, the developers, government representatives. I want to try to understand everybody's perspective in this because I think collaboration is important. Yeah. and we certainly don't have a solution in place. Affordability is, I think, the objective behind a lot of this.
Yes.
Supply is the fix, I guess, the immediate target.
That's what they say.
But affordability is important, and for me as a property manager, I have no control over market rents.
Nope.
And I have a requirement to protect my investors' investments.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there because
Sure.
you said two good points in the sense of it's funny because like I explain this with real estate too. It's the market is dictated by buyers. Always has been, always will be, right? If someone rents out a apartment at $4,000 a month and they can't get renters, the market's deemed that to be too high of rent for what they're charging, right?
Yeah.
Then they have to lower the price to get into a competitive market, right?
Correct.
Just like with houses. So people are usually outraged or are surprised at seeing things go $100,000 over asking, $130,000 over asking on a listed property for sale. But the thing is that when they go for 100, 120, 130, 140, 150, it's because that 10 or more people have put in offers to purchase this property. So, for example, a client of mine not too long ago bid I'm not going to say the number, but it was a significantly high number for this house and got it in competition. After finding out that they got it, asked if we could renegotiate on price because they felt they were uncomfortable with how much they paid. And the way I explain it is we absolutely can, but the thing right now is you are one of 10. And we know that in the one of 10, 8 and 9 were really close to us. So if we go back to the table to renegotiate, there's a good chance you're going to lose this house because they'll go with 8 or 9. And I think that's what the market is right now, in the sense that you have so many people looking for rentals that you have, instead of a landlord having one person negotiating a rent price, they now have 10 people and 8 of them are willing to pay it. And you'll get that one or two that say, I have more capital in my bank account through my position or my wealth or whatever I've done to create this access to capital, that I'm even willing to pay more. I know people who have actually negotiated higher rents to be able to secure a home. Same thing, right?
Yep,
and
very competitive.
It just seems to be the market that we're in, and that's why the rent cap is there, and to ensure that there is some security. Because we've seen the examples on Reddit, I certainly have, where someone's rent has gone up by 150%, where it was at $700, increased to $2,100, and it's sort of 3 months notice, and they can't afford that. Honestly, how many people can actually afford $2,100 for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath?
Right.
So I understand where it's coming from. It's interesting now to see what investors are doing. I know I've talked to a few investors that I've worked with who have told me, only vacant. Don't send me anything with a tenant, only vacant properties. And the way I explain it to them is everyone's going to be looking at that. You're going to pay, you think you're paying a premium now, wait until competition shows up.
Right.
Right? And if you have a vacant asset, if I was selling a vacant asset today, I'd charge a little higher for the sale price because there's more value in that thanks to the rent cap for a potential investor.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's I guess to caveat this into a segue would be, how do you see this rent cap playing out over the next 2 years into what it's going to do for the actual market?
So what I'm presenting to a lot of investors now is we need to be a little more creative in our purchases. A lot of investors that I speak with are generally initially have a single family home or a 2-unit within their budget. That certainly restricts them in this market and what they can buy, and a lot of them are just stuck. They can't find that property, and when they do, it's very competitive, like you said, even within the investor community. So I'm presenting some more strategic methods in terms of property investing, whether that be through joint ventures. You do have a lot more opportunity when you're looking at multi-unit properties. The competition is not necessarily as high, but it may not be within your budget. So perhaps we look at some form of a partnership or some other model that could work for your situation. Alternatively, perhaps we look outside the core HRM market. We have a lot of very good markets in Nova Scotia right now from a rental market perspective. So I've been meeting with a lot of folks in various areas in the province and getting more familiar with those areas myself, and have taken on properties now within my property management portfolio outside of HRM. And there is a lot of opportunity outside the city. And I think that's not as well known within the investor community as it could be.
Yes.
So the same restrictions will certainly apply, but I think there's more opportunity and less competition. The rents certainly aren't as high, but the sale prices are lower. So looking at cap rates, there's certainly opportunity to make it work.
Yes.
And that's really a big part of my focus right now, is trying to educate the investors if they aren't as well informed within the local market, and show them options. And I do have a good network within Nova Scotia who do entertain the idea of JVs and other methods of investment. So I'm happy to connect investors with those connections if need be.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
The outside, I've been trying to put people to the outside markets for at least a year now, because HRM is, I'm not going to say the word overpriced, but there is a number you have to pay to be in HRM now that just doesn't suffice for investors' sake. If they're looking for cash flow, if they're looking for equity gains, just buy a place. The equity will be fine. You're going to make that back in a year. You're going to make that back in 2 years. You'll make it back in 5. You'll make it back in 10. The way that supply looks and immigration projections are for the next 10 years, your investment more or less should be safe in HRM. Even in the rural markets, like the Valley is a great market to be in. Truro always been great for multi-units. Bridgewater is getting there for good opportunities as well. I've heard people going as far as New Glasgow now.
That's right. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of investors purchasing multi-units down the New Glasgow market for cents on the dollar of what it would be in Halifax.
You've named all the top markets on my radar. And I just recently picked up a property in Antigonish, so just a little beyond New Glasgow there. If you drive to any of these areas such as Bridgewater or New Glasgow, you'll notice there's a lot of highway twinning happening right now within the province, which is just opening up access as well to these markets. Bridgewater, I think, is an interesting one because it is within commuting distance to the city. And as house prices are starting to become out of reach of a lot of certainly first-time home buyers, with this increased access to these other communities, I see opportunity for those areas to grow as well, not just from a rental market perspective, but from a buyer's perspective as well. And with that certainly brings more industry in the long run. Yeah,
Windsor's my favorite. I love Windsor. Yeah. I'll never not talk about Windsor. It's I think I call that place like the land of opportunity for real estate investors or even first-time home buyers, because it's still really close to the city. It's a 30-minute drive, 35 minute. Yeah. You can still, the home prices are still relatively good for what you can get for both investor and single-family home buyers. I do want to switch gears though. How you said you launched Eastbrook Management Company this year. How many properties are currently under your management?
So I'm currently managing 3 of my clients' properties. I have 2 of my own properties as well.
Yep.
Again, just recent launch.
No, so of course.
I certainly expect that to pick up in the near future as we start releasing some marketing materials.
Yep.
So with that, we've got a total of 9 units under our management right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you only launched this in September?
We launched it in the spring, actually.
Okay.
So by launch, I mean just putting up a website, and I really started doing some networking, having phone calls and meetings. And so again, the marketing's been quite light. The public launch is actually coming up in the next month or so.
Congratulations.
Which there will be a lot more social media being pushed out there to get the message out. And from there, we'll have a larger launch in the new year.
Yeah. What kind of systems do you offer your clients, the 9 that you're currently managing their properties? What are you doing to help alleviate their stress and their concerns with managing their assets, whether they're both local or not from the province?
Absolutely. And so my background, I mentioned, is in project management, but within the IT sector. So when I developed my business, I started planning this business about 2 years ago. I had actually planned to launch it March of 2020. We all know what happened in March of 2020. So I put the brakes on just to see where the world would go.
Yeah.
So that brought me forward a year later when I was confident things were stabilizing. But it gave me a year to really further develop my systems and processes and the tech on the back end. My goal is to really provide really good communication for my clients, my investors, not just my investors, my tenants, and give them access to that information they need. So from day one, when I get a phone call from an investor, for example, looking for a new property, I will show them my system. So I'll help them, walk them through the process of finding the property, ensure they have a realtor. Of course, the realtor has the right tools to find the right properties. But once that purchase is made, I have an onboarding process where I basically do a full inspection for maintenance requirements so they can understand any maintenance costs associated with that property, provide a full report of what should be addressed immediately, but I also provide a long-term maintenance plan for the routine maintenance items, but also identify areas for improvement where you can optimize and increase the value of the property in the long run. So I do have a maintenance system in place so they can really view the work that's ongoing. In addition to that, I have a property owner portal where they can view all their financials at any point in time. They can log into their account and really see their cash flow in real time, see any costs, operational costs associated with property on a month-to-month basis, as well as see their forecasts. So again, my job as a property manager is to protect their investment. So when they purchase a property, we don't stop there. We want to make sure you're hitting your targets and your returns. So
yes.
From the beginning, I want to understand your objectives and your goals in purchasing that property. And that all comes down to crunching the numbers. So I work with them to crunch those numbers and making sure you have a profitable property.
Yeah.
And we'll track that on a monthly basis, and you can view that at any point in time. So by having these online systems, it cuts down on the phone calls, on the emails. It's really self-serve, and that's what I'm going for. Allow my clients to have all the information at their fingertips at any point in time, so they're fully informed. When you don't have the right information, that's where you get a lot of questions, and perhaps it provides confidence that we're doing our job, protecting your investment, and you're going to see your returns, whether that be a 10-year plan, 15-year plan, or 20-year plan.
That long as everything's on the right path,
correct,
everything's managed, and they have access to that information right away. Now, that's from you mentioned clients, right? You said property managers. What about the tenants? Do they have access to this information too, or do they have their own portal for their own needs and wants in terms of they're living in this place too, right? So they might need a stove replaced or something like that. Do they have access to information too, so that they can make requests on things that they want done or that they need done?
Correct. Yeah. So the tenants can submit a service request at any point in time. That request comes into us, and then we issue that to a vendor. If it's the stove issue, as you said, we relay that to an appliance tech, and the tenant can see that in real time, as well as we're taking action on the request. And we can also use that to schedule the visits and ensure the work is done. And the owner also has access to that information, so they can see that the work is being completed and any associated costs with that. So again, really focusing on that communications aspect and making it easy for the tenant as much as we can as well. From the tenant's perspective, again, trying to understand their perspective as well. And they want to make sure that we're responsive, and that we're going to address their needs in a timely manner. I know a lot of people are hesitant to get in the investment space because of those 3 a.m. calls. But to be honest, I've been in this for 13 years now. I've never had a 3 a.m. call. And I think that just comes down to good maintenance planning and good processes, so tenants will report issues, so the small issues don't turn into big issues. And that, in my experience, when you have the bigger issues, it's because it wasn't reported earlier.
Yes.
Such as what could have been a leaky tap at one point, goes on for a few months, and that could turn into a break in the plumbing.
I mean, leaky
a flood.
Yeah, I was gonna say leaky tap can turn into, if it's on the second story and it's going down, it's drywall, it's floors. It goes a lot further than just
right. A $50 fix could turn into a $10,000
nightmare. And if the tenants are there, you gotta get in and do it while they're there.
Yeah, and I'm clear on this when I onboard a tenant as well. I ensure they know the process. I ensure they know I'm available 24/7 if anything comes up, and that's very important. But to establish that confidence and know that I'm going to respond and take care of their issue, it's more likely that they're actually going to report that issue.
That's interesting. So, okay, you said you have an onboarding process for the investor, which is looking at the property, letting them know what renovations are projected in the future, what needs to be done immediately, and how their investment's going to look over time increments of 5, 10, 15, 20 years, so that they understand what the goals are, or you understand what the goals are for them and for this person and their property and where they're trying to get to. What's your onboarding process look like for a tenant, and how do you qualify the tenant for the property to make sure it's a good fit?
Okay, so to walk through our tenant placement process, it starts with the advertisement.
Yeah.
Again, when we onboard a new property, we do evaluation and assessment to determine the current market rental rate. Again, most properties we take on these days are already occupied.
Yes.
So the rates are already established, but we do want to understand what that current market value is. So if there is a placement required, we set that rate, and then certainly take all the pictures and put together the property description to sell it appropriately, and we'll post that on various online social media.
Kijiji Marketplace.
To get that out there. Again, in today's market, you can easily get swarmed with a couple hundred applicants. So it's very important that you ask the right questions and understand the tenant's needs. When I meet with a tenant, when I place a tenant, I want to make sure it's not just a rental for them, it's a home.
Yeah.
And that's what ensures a long-term tenant, and that ensures they're happy, so it needs to be the right fit. So very much like you as a realtor, when you're selling a property to a buyer, you want to make sure all the amenities are in the neighborhood, schools, shopping, all those factors. The same applies to a tenant. It needs to meet their lifestyle needs. So that's really what I focus on. We do, once we narrow down our applicants, we then start a screening process. So we use a third-party service to do background checks, credit checks. It also provides a record of their past rental history. Should they have used this system in the past, it is becoming more and more common.
Okay.
So it provides a lot of good information to assess the person and their background. Of course, we do reference checks and all that as well, but we want to have good data and make sure, again, it's the right fit for the person.
Yep.
And from there, once we narrow down our selection, I meet with the applicant.
You meet them in person?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In my experience, there's nothing better than a good discussion.
Yep.
To assess a tenant and make sure it's the right fit for them. And from there, when we make the selection, we hand over the keys and we walk them through the property. We do the inspection, the initial move-in inspection, and take any pictures and so on if there are any defects within the property. And of course, we complete that on the termination of the lease as well. But again, back to our discussion on the maintenance, I want to make sure the home is safe and they understand certain risks when it comes to things like fire, water damage. So I ensure they know where a water shutoff is, for example.
Do you?
And not a lot of homeowners don't even know where there's water shutoff.
Nope.
So a water shutoff, there's a valve where the water line comes into a house from the municipal service. And if you have a line break in your house, that's the first thing you should do.
Turn the shutoff off.
Turn off, and that'll immediately stop all water flow in the house.
Yes.
That takes 2 minutes to do. Whereas if you're running around scrambling, literally 30 minutes of a gushing pipe could cause thousands of dollars of damage in your house. So
yes,
I want to ensure tenants know where that is, but also that they understand the implications of a flood. If there is a lot of damage in the property, they will have to move. Now, it is the onus of the property owner to find them a new place, or even
a hotel.
Put them in a hotel if required and cover the cost. But it's a disruption to their life.
Yes.
And I want to make sure they understand that. So that protects the tenant's home, but as well as the investor's property.
Well, the best relationship between an investor and a tenant, and you as well, is when everyone understands each other's role and they understand where and how everything works. In terms of a house anyway, most tenants don't really understand how the day-to-day function of a house goes in terms of regular maintenance and upkeep, and what the signs are of distress or disrepair in a home. And if they can't identify that, which, you don't blame them in any way, shape, or form. It's not their job.
Absolutely not. No, that is 100% my job as a property manager, and I take full accountability for it. So it starts with that initial inspection. We do a full inspection every 6 months.
Really?
And it's really to target those maintenance requirements. Again, we set up the maintenance plan from the beginning, but things happen. We all know that.
Yep.
So do a full inspection every 6 months. But with any general maintenance visit, we'll say, or any reason for a visit to the property, we generally do
have a look around.
Have a look around. Nothing formal. I certainly try to. I try to stay out of the tenant space as much as possible, and I certainly don't want to invade their privacy. But it is important that the home is maintained, and again, like you said, not everybody knows those telling signs when something might be failing in a home. Like
a little bubbling on drywall.
Correct. Yeah.
Water's behind the wall.
Water's fall. Yeah. Yeah. Or a small amount of mold, perhaps in the corner of a ceiling.
Or the bathroom fan not working, or not being, or simply put, not being turned on because it's noisy. And then you get that little spotting in the ceiling where people think, the amount of times I've seen people think, oh my God, that's black mold. No. Go Canadian Tire. There's a $20 spray can, spray it down, wipe, clean ceiling, right?
That's right.
But if you don't turn on the shower, you don't understand that moisture has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's usually your surface area.
That's right.
And if it's not your surface area, then that means that there's a crevice somewhere behind a wall it's getting to.
That's right. Yeah. And there are a number of components, major components to a home that need to work together to ensure that home stays in good condition.
Thermostat and furnace.
Heating is critical, and certainly we know it's important for a comfortable home, but heating does play a factor in keeping the home well maintained as well. But not just heating, the circulation as well. Air circulation is critical. For health reasons as well.
I was in a house recently. The homeowners, they didn't own it. I mean, they owned it, but they didn't live in it. That's what I mean. And it was vacant, so they shut off the furnace and shut off the water, shut everything, all the municipal services off. And because they didn't have heat, the basement wasn't insulated, it was just drywalled. So hot, humid summer creates moisture. Moisture had nowhere to go because there was nothing there to service it or breathe it out. Mold, surface area turned into mold on the drywall, which then turned into black mold on every surface in the basement. So heat plays a role. So does ventilation. Insulation plays a huge role in keeping a house safe from that type of stuff. And that is why you need to make sure, as you say, all the systems are in place to make sure that the house and or tenant remains intact, so that it still maintains a living standard. That's a big conversation right now in this market, is living standard in Halifax.
Yeah, and I recognize that, and we've developed a program around home efficiency, home energy efficiency. And this kind of goes back to the affordability discussion too, but I have a strong consciousness of the environment, and there's a lot of mandates in place now to improve home efficiency in the province. And Nova Scotia certainly provided a lot of programs to help with that, such as Efficiency Nova Scotia, their home energy assessment and rebate programs. My wife and I just took advantage of this program this past year, and we own a 1950s bungalow in Dartmouth that really hadn't had any updates since it was built.
They never do.
So it was a cold home. It was very humid in the winter, certainly in the basement. So we had the assessment completed. They provided a lot of great recommendations. We've since completed about $40,000 in work in the last year, but notably insulation, a heat pump, right into our ducted system that was already available with our oil furnace. And it's literally night and day.
Yeah.
In our property right now, it's a very comfortable home. We've seen a big reduction in our energy costs. I crunched the numbers recently, and we're looking at about a 15% decrease in energy costs right now. But it's not necessarily apples to apples, because with COVID, we were living home full time last year, whereas my prior numbers, we were working full-time in an office.
Of course.
So that number's likely quite higher. And it's certainly subjective to the property, but our experience has been very good. So that cost savings is in our pocket for our energy expenses. Our home is much happier for it.
Of course it is.
Because it's well ventilated, it's well heated, it's running very efficiently. But putting this into the context of a property owner, a tenant, so if I were to take those same measures on a rental property, those cost savings are transferred to the tenant in terms of their heating bill. And they have a much more a healthier home to live in. Well, but it's also added value to my home in terms of resale.
Of course.
In the long run. So it's a win-win.
Well, the other thing in terms of going back to what the tenant pays in utilities, which is a big thing in Halifax right now, is people are charging these high rents, $1,800, $1,900, $2,000, where they're asking for utilities covered as well. If you can get that utility down to, let's say, a $50 bill bi-monthly from Nova Scotia Power, the tenant might be more open to paying a $1,800, $1,900 rent. Probably not. Let's just be frank. But if you were to be able to eliminate some of those utility costs through energy efficiency products, your investor sees a return on investment, because that only helps them in resale down the road. And it also helps their home function and have less deterrence down the road. Your tenant is more happy to stay because their cost of living is a little lower. That all goes hand in hand, right?
That's right.
I want to stick on tenants here, right? Because with tenants and property investors, you always get the horror stories of tenants and what can go wrong. You've been a property investor now since 2008, so 13 years.
That's right.
What mistakes do you see property managers or property owners make with tenants that has come to bite them in the ass?
Screening, number one.
Okay.
Screening is very important. And I've learned from my own mistakes. You really need to adequately screen your tenants, ensure that the information they're providing is accurate. References don't always check out, even though they might sound good on the phone. You want to ensure the information you're getting is valid. I found myself in a couple of sticky situations and was very much taken advantage of.
Oh no!
And the termination process takes time.
Yes.
If in this situation the tenant stopped paying rent, so certainly issued the notice for eviction, but that takes time to process, go to hearing, and so on. So all in all, it took about 6 months.
6 months of you paying for their rent?
So that's expensive, and in that, and they were very familiar with the system and knew they had that allotment. And, so it really, that's the biggest mistake I've seen, and a lot of people just learn from a bad experience. They need to be more diligent when it comes to screening and ensure they're getting the right tenant. So again, I'm looking for a tenant who's the right fit for the home, and that's based on their personal requirements, but also somebody that's trustworthy and giving me valid information, and I know they're going to stick to their deal as well. Yeah. A lease is a legal contract, and tenants need to realize that. So there are repercussions if they don't meet the conditions. But it certainly has implications on the owner as well.
Yeah, of course.
If those conditions are not met.
No, it's between both parties.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, hopefully, when you say there's legal repercussions for the tenant, there's also legal repercussions for the property owner or the property manager in case the property is not upkept to a certain standard. Right?
Right.
It's all like a living organism. It all lives together in a cohesive environment until someone does something. When you're talking about, it's funny you've managed to launch a property management company in COVID and with a rent cap in place in this province at 2%. How has the rent cap affected business so far? And what are some challenges you've seen as you try and grow in this type of climate that we're in today?
The challenges right from the get-go are the hesitancy now to purchase. And I'm meeting with a lot of investors across the country who don't necessarily have the full picture, and they are very eager to invest in Nova Scotia. But once they really see the challenges, there's a lot of hesitancy, and I've had a lot back out.
Yeah.
For that reason. Perhaps one, it's just not within their budget because of our current market prices for purchasing. But yes, once they realize the controls that are in place now, that adds a little more hesitancy. So I suspect that's had an impact on my immediate growth.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm really trying to provide some strategic options now, not just the conventional approach.
Yes.
And I think that's the solution. And again, we're not the first province to be in this situation. And I have a good network of investors right across the country who have really applied a lot of these strategic methods in other markets and have been very successful. You look at the GTA, for example, which, they've certainly been through this as well. And the prices have gone through the roof in the last decade. But investment is still happening.
Yes.
So it's not a complete roadblock. And not only are the prices through the roof, rent control is in place in a lot of these markets already. So it doesn't stop investment.
No,
it just requires some strategic thinking and replanning.
You just get creative.
That's right.
You're just trying to figure out how you can still figure out. The way I always say is you've just changed the rules of the game. The best players adapt to the rule changes.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the fodder just, gets dealt with. And that's what it is when it comes to this rent control cap for investors' sake, for investment's sake, as we're talking about here, because you are a property manager. When you have investors looking for purchasing, the rent cap is not necessarily a bullet to the brain. It's just simply another critical aspect of your assessment of a potential investment property and the risk you are taking on. Because if it is tenanted, 2 years, for the next 2 years and 2 months, because we're only October 22nd, you will have to do a 2% increase on your rent. So if you're purchasing something in Fairview at $450,000 and each unit rents at $800 a piece, that's not cash flowing. And we talk about cash is king when it comes to investment properties.
That's right.
2% on $800 is $16. I only know that math because I did it before. Cheat sheet.
Yeah.
$16 over 2 units is $32 a month. That's, less than $400 gained.
Yeah.
And if you have to do a new kitchen renos, people quote 10, but you and I know better. It's 10 if you do it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's 10 if you do the demo and order the cabinets and do the install. If you actually want someone to come in and do a kitchen, and you do nothing, 20, 30, 40. Like they can, depending on what high end you want to go for finishes. Do you want to go the IKEA route? However you want to do it. But recouping let's just go with a minimal $20,000 investment on a new kitchen if you do no work. $360 for that $16 increase. For that times 2 is 32. Isn't going to deal with cut that. You're going to be pouring money in.
That's right.
So it's being able to identify those different markets, different opportunities, and being able to have the flexibility to move within the confines of the new world. But it's also learning the new world and understanding that when you take on any renovation project, now there's going to be added cost in terms of compensating the tenant for the rent eviction.
That's right.
If they can prove you did it for rent eviction.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is for the next 2 years. So there are other opportunities in terms of renovations, certainly exterior renovations.
Yep.
And a 4-unit I recently took on is luckily a lot of the interior renovations were completed a couple of years ago. So they're in a good place in that regard, but the exterior needs a lot of work.
Okay.
So this particular example, in my mind, which is a great purchase for the investor, there's an opportunity to add value and with the exterior renos.
Yeah, because you can make it seem more family friendly.
Correct.
You can give the presence and feeling that it's not just another slumlord home, as we know in the city you do have.
Yeah.
Right? If you can change the siding, mow the lawn, add a new coat of paint, which goes the furthest for changing the landscape.
Street appeal is huge.
Yes.
It's huge. Yeah. So there's definitely opportunity there. The home energy efficiency projects as well can generally be done while the home is occupied.
Yes.
So there's another opportunity
to
add value within the current restrictions. So again, trying to be strategic within these current boundaries, but again, it's not a showstopper. But you do have to kind of rethink the plan and assess it a little differently.
For anyone that is thinking about getting a property manager, how much do you cost for the average home, for the average investor?
So it varies depending on the size of your portfolio. It starts at, so it's broken out into 2 factors. We have our property management fees, which is a monthly fee for the day-to-day operations and managing the tenants and the rent collection and so on. The starting fee is at 10%, and that reduces depending on the size of your portfolio.
Okay.
In addition to that, we also have a fee for our tenant placements, and that's at 50% of the first month's rent.
Okay.
So let's take a new property that we onboard, for example, that's not occupied. So you purchase the property, then we come in and do the onboarding for the property, all the things I previously mentioned. Once we place the tenant, so you'll be charged 50% of that first month's rent, and then in the second month, that's when the property management fees kick in and applicable to your portfolio.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, in addition to that, we provide project management services as well. So for the home renovations, for example, we take that on a project-by-project basis, and we'll put together the scope of work, organize the contractors and all that as well, and we'll come to an agreement on our compensation for that project.
Yeah, but it'll be just a percent of the amount of work completed, right?
Correct,
so you're taking on $100,000 reno, you take 5%, you make $5,000.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all direct compare. It's all correlative. I'm terrible at English. It all works together or goes together, right? Because if you're charging a project for a brand new, let's say basement, bathroom reno, it's going to be $50. The amount of work you take on over hours and stuff, make sure compensation is there, but that's agreed upon before you begin the project.
That's right. Yeah. That's a separate contract in itself.
Of course. Okay. So it's not just a 10% flat rate and everything's covered. There are nuances in there depending on the structure, condition of the home, and the condition of the tenants, because you might be taking on a project where a investor has taken on bad tenants, because they do exist, and you have to evict them. Well, I'm sure there's compensation for dealing with the tenancy board and eviction notices and small claims courts if it goes that far, appeals. If you have to get the sheriff involved to do an eviction, forced eviction as well, and the damage is done with that. And property management's fun.
It is fun, yeah. And like I said, I like a challenge, yeah. But when it comes to all those other nuances, it comes back to risk management, and that's a strong focus within my business as well. And you really recognize the risks through experience. And in starting up a business, I'm glad I have that experience under my belt with my own properties.
Yes.
And I'm glad I learn those lessons with my own properties as opposed to my clients' properties.
Of course.
So I have that confidence that I can properly mitigate those risks. And I'm happy to say I've never been through a hearing or again, there was the one eviction I had to deal with probably about a decade ago.
Yep.
Since then, it's been very clean. And again, it comes back to the good screening.
Yes.
And the good, really good maintenance planning as well.
What parts of the province are you currently operating with Eastbrook Management?
So currently we have property in Dartmouth or in Antigonish and also in Bridgewater.
Okay. Are you looking to expand in case someone has a property in Cape Breton?
Not at the moment, but I'm certainly entertaining expanding. So as we expand our radius, I am now building up my teams in those areas.
Okay.
I'm still a pretty small shop, as you can imagine, being a new company, but so I'm building up my team of vendors and contractors within all these regions. But once I develop my portfolios as well, I do plan to have property managers on the ground for those regions as well.
What are you looking for team members? Just because like someone here might be looking to join a business relationship or create a business relationship.
Of course, it's pretty wide when looking at property management, and that's a big part of my job is really managing the relationships within the business. So let's start from the aspect of the real estate investor. When I get a phone call, often they haven't even talked to a realtor yet for purchase. So realtors.
Yep.
And then when I onboard the property, there's the maintenance aspects, so plumbers, electricians, snow clearing, lawn care and landscaping. Also general maintenance people to take on. I'm putting together a scope of work right now for a property that really just has a long list of, we'll say, small things.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily as easy to contract out to a trade.
No, of course.
So general maintenance staff as well.
Okay.
It's very important to take care of those aspects. But really any trade is critical. Roofers, windows and siding. As I'm taking on home renovation projects, it's important that I have these suppliers and vendors to complete the work.
Yep.
And
guys you can trust.
And yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth. So through developing these relationships, I build trust, and I want to ensure that the people I hire are going to do the work that's expected. And I also have a good understanding of what the costs are.
Of course.
Based on their rates and previous experience working with them.
Yeah.
So it takes time, and with today's shortage in the labor market, it certainly presents challenges, but it's coming together, and my teams are growing, and it's happening pretty quickly. So you want to be able, again, respond when needed. When you
get a call, I mean, you tell the clients are available 24/7. So if you ever do get that call at 3 a.m. and it's in a different city, because you're in Dartmouth, as you've already said, then you need to have someone on call to answer that call, right? Then that's where you build the team. Yeah. Before we get out of here, I'm just curious, how has your own experience of your own investment properties directly affect your want to get into this industry? Just out of curiosity, as to why did the investment properties make you want to get into property management? Just because you felt you could do it better, or there weren't enough options that you weren't happy with?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel I could do it better. I have a lot of business experience. My background in project management, I've actually worked with a lot of large organizations and public sector utilities. And my job is to improve how businesses run.
Okay.
So number one, I feel like I can do it better and provide a high standard. But two, you got to enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
I just have a passion for properties. I love seeing how different homes are built, how they run, how they operate. Since I was a kid, I love taking things apart and putting them back together. It's just one of the things I love to do. I love to know how things work and make sure they run properly. So there's that aspect, just really enjoying the property management aspect. But really the big aspect is meeting more people. In my career, I've been very lucky that networking is a big part of what I do, and I wanted to expand that. And like I mentioned, a property manager is really about building relationships. There are a lot of professionals you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's not just the vendors, it's also the investors and the tenants.
Yeah.
So I'm meeting new people every day, learning from their experiences, learning from their different requirements. And that applies to my business model because everybody's story and everybody's situation is different. So the more I can understand regarding my customers' needs, the better service I can provide.
Perfect.
And there's always room for improvement, and that's what I focus on every day is how can I make this business run efficiently and effectively for my customers.
Nice. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Jason. It's fun.
I'll see you soon, okay?
Cheers.
Bye. If you'd like to get in touch with Mark Kennedy, you can reach him at 902-229-9356 or at mark@eastbrookmanagement.ca. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can reach me at 902-220-7357 or jason@infinityrealestategroup.ca. Thanks again. Bye.